So, hi everybody, I'm Deb Evans. I'd like to welcome you to the Houston Franchise Business Network meeting. We have an impressive panel today. One piece of housekeeping notes is thank you very much, Christian Brothers, for hosting us. This is great, really love it. There's a couple of IFA meetings coming up. We have in August, there is the Franchise Capital Exchange. If you Google that, you can see what Franchise Capital Exchange. If you're a franchisor looking for investment, it'd be a good opportunity for you to go there. In September, I think it's September 13th and 15th, is the legislation, talk about franchising, why, NLRB, all of that fun stuff. And then in October, which is my absolute favorite, is Fran Tech. October 26th and 27th is in Austin, Texas. If you want to learn more about franchising and networking as far as technology and marketing, this is the event to go to. Ann Littman is going to be on a panel at Fran Tech. We're going to talk about an emerging franchisor, how they use technology and their journey in franchising. So we've got a lot coming on with franchising. Look at franchise.org and you can see all the events. Introduce our panel today. We have Thomas Scott from Brand Journalist out of Nashville, who flew in this morning. Thank you, Thomas. We have Wayne Bunch with DLA Piper right here in Houston, an attorney, so he's going to cover the legalese part of it. And Josh Wall with Christian Brothers in franchise development. So I'm going to turn it over to Thomas. Do you need to pick it from here or do you take it? Okay. And we are on Facebook Live, but you guys, well, I'm not going to put you on, but Facebook Live, we'll take questions from them and give them to you when the time comes.
Sounds good.
Good.
All right. I'm going to walk through some of the slides.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's great.
So I can see what I'm talking about. How many of you are franchisors and how many are franchise? Raise your hand if you're a franchisor. Some of your franchisees too. That's good. This topic really is geared towards recruiting franchisees, like how do you as a company not kill your business and do a smart job of recruiting franchisees, like the people who buy the franchise. And a lot of the concepts we're going to cover today apply to consumer marketing too. So even if you're a franchisee, some of the way people buy things has changed dramatically when people research things. There's a lot of takeaways you can take away from this. So don't think that it's all going to be a sales and development conversation one way or the other. Just my background. I specialize in franchise lead generation. We work with 30 or so clients from big to small, and to help people grow. And it's really, I have what I think is the best gig in franchising. I get to look behind the curtains at all kind of companies and see what works and what doesn't work, and we get to solve the same problems every day. And I'm very passionate, have been a franchisee and a franchisor, and I'm very kind of passionate about the franchise industry. And I'm really thankful that you took the time to come to the FBN meetings. When I was a franchisor, these are really stellar ways to learn. One of the really amazing things about franchising is people just will share their mistakes with you, and they really don't want you to make the same mistake they made. And so it's a great resource for that. So let's talk a little bit about some industry stats. I'm going to go through a few slides, and then we're going to have a panel conversation and open it up. But last year was a really great year for franchising. It's one of the best years on record. There's 795,933 franchise locations open in the U.S., almost 800,000 locations. They produce over $944 billion a year in sales, which is just over 3% of the GNP. So really big numbers. Franchising was very healthy last year. And more importantly, last year in 2015, there was more than one new franchisor starting a day in 2015. So if you're a franchise attorney, that's not music to your ears, I'm sure. But it also is a sign of the times that people are looking to franchising as a more legitimate business model. It doesn't have the trust issues it had decades past, and with the transparency and access to information, people are opting for entrepreneurship, and they're thinking about how can I become a franchisee, how can I franchise my business, and that looks like a smart way to do things, and so I think that's real important, and we see that going on this year. I don't know if you see that trend going through this year. Has your business been pretty busy?
Yeah, very busy. A lot of new
franchisors. Historically in franchising, we see these iconic brands like Sonic and 3,500 locations. Kim Dry's got 5,000. Some of our clients have huge. But what I really love are these concepts that are starting up, that their end goal is to get to 25 or 50 units. They want to be a boutique kind of the real deal type of a franchise system. So you're seeing a lot of those brands get into franchising who don't have the goal of being, thousands of units. They just want to be really, really good at what they do and have a sustainable business that's good for their owners. We look at Google search data as we manage lead generation for lots of companies, and we pay a lot of attention to how people buy franchises. We look at the language they use, we pay attention to search trends. My professional kind of expectation of how many people are in the audience of people that could possibly buy a franchise right now is about 12 million. Out of 123 million people in the U.S. at any point, there's a group of 12 million people that could become franchise owners at any point. But 12 million is a lot. That's the biggest number. That's a bigger number than we've had in our industry since the launch. You might think, 123 million people, how can you only find these two people to run for president? Okay, how that work? But that's, if you look at how many franchisees we recruit, we only recruit 14,000 franchisees a year. That's the entire industry recruited 14,000 people last year. That's it. That's just not very many. So I would look at that and go, if you're a franchise development person, you're really tracking conversion rates and paying attention to metrics and KPIs. That's a really lousy conversion rate. And it's like less than a fraction of a 10% of the people that could be owners actually take the step to become a franchise owner, which I think is an opportunity for us to grow. The average franchisor last year projected 24 deals a year. That seems to be what most companies, when they get their momentum going, shoot to get a pipeline of people to do 24 deals, which is roughly 2 a month. The average cost per close was $9,800 for advertising costs. So it means for every one of those 24 deals, the typical franchise system spent $9,800 in advertising and related costs generally. So it's not cheap to recruit people. I mean, you have to spend that much, but I don't know what your cost per sale is, Josh. It might be more than that. So
No, it's much less than
less than
that.
50.
A little less than $4,000.
Oh, good. That's typical of a lot of brands. In food brands, that price can easily be up in the 15s, depending on how qualified a buyer is and what you need to investment level. And so the average lead generation budget was $218,000 for a typical company last year. And this is based off the franchise updates lead generation survey. So what's your budget for a typical year?
And right now, we're actually not spend it all,
Yeah.
but still hit our goal.
Yeah. So that would be a little bit of an outlier.
It
Probably
is,
know
yeah.
why your friends in franchising spend a lot more than that.
Yeah. I mean, our goals are fairly close to that, 24, but our cost per sales for 2015 numbers was $39.50.
Yeah, so good. $4,000 cost per sale is great. I mean, if you hit that, or even 5,000 or 6,000, you're
Yeah.
way above average in franchising, and you're doing a lot of stuff right. An interesting thing about search traffic is the amount of interest in the search volume for all franchise-related inquiries, which are the inquiries that people use when they're researching or buying a franchise. It's really kind of stayed more or less current, but the interest in business opportunity searches has dropped off. And what that says to us is that more people are looking at franchising, particularly younger people, millennials and younger, looking at franchising as a more trustworthy, less risky investment to make. And I think that's a great trend, because that means we have more people. If more people think they don't have this idea that franchising is this legally bound, litigious, scary thing where you have to cut off your leg and get to the franchisor. It's become much more of a transparent business model today than it used to be. It doesn't have a lot of pitfalls. And that has to do with the way people research businesses. Like if you, how many of you have been on a trip recently, like a vacation, planned a vacation? So what kind of research did you do before you went on your trip?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going someplace I go all the time, so I didn't do anything.
Anybody go somewhere new?
Sorry.
Where'd you go?
We went to Denver. We Googled places to go and restaurants to visit and
So how'd you pick a restaurant for,
Yelp.
Yeah.
Reviews.
based on the reviews? Yeah, so Google calls that the era of self-directed research, and that affects, I ran a home staging franchise in Lee year, and have been doing that for now, going on almost 35 years now, so it's been around for a long time. We learned from doing that many transactions that if you could keep somebody in a house for 45 minutes, a magical thing happened. People would fall in love with the house. and almost always pay list price for the house, and that's why you hardly ever see a house. If you look at HGTV, you're gonna see staged house after staged house after staged house, because it works really well. The psychology is really universal. People begin to see the life that they see themselves living becomes worth more than the value of the house. If you can slow somebody down and get them to think about the life in the house, well, it's like home staging, we call that licking paint. People get so excited they want to lick the paint off the wall. The franchise purchase is a very similar transaction to a home purchase. It involves a tremendous amount of research and a lot of emotional attachment to the idea. People sell themselves on it. Just kind of a snapshot of where franchise buyers come from. If we look at those 14,000 units that business that we recruited as an industry in 15, 65% were new owners, 20% were internal expansions, where people who already had a business and were buying a second, third, or fourth, and 15% came from a variety of brokers. Could be resale brokers, franchise brokers, stuff like the Business Alliance or FredNet, some of those. That's kind of interesting. And then lastly, the types of franchise buyers are not monolithic. There's not just one type of person. There are three very distinct groups of people, and each group buys and researches businesses differently. And that means they have different sales processes, different ways of doing. So the baby boomer, which probably there's a good bit in this room, has historically been the majority of franchise purchases. And Crane Data did a really interesting survey, and 9% of baby boomers said they were open to or would associate a career choice of becoming an entrepreneur. Only 9%, so only 1 out of 10, of 10 baby boomers, one of them would really be open to becoming an entrepreneur and possibly buying a franchise or other non-franchise business. The millennials, which are the groups born before 1996 and later, like 32 and younger now in today's market, 60% of that group said I would be open to and interested in owning a business. That's a pretty big gap. So millennials are a bigger group now than baby boomers. Then there's the Generation X, which is my group that nobody cares about. They get no respect. That
Lost in the shuffle.
just shut up and go. But they are kind of in the middle. They're much more entrepreneurial than baby boomers, and research things in some similar ways to the way they were the first to adapt technology, the first to adapt social media, and the last two kind of grouped together. So
Leaders on lead generation, especially digital lead generation, and how the industry has evolved over the last decade. So it's a real pleasure to have you down here in Nashville. And so I would say during Christian Brothers, our brand has been franchising for 20 years, and we have recruited franchisees very differently. And I would say we're in the third phase of how we recruit our franchisees. So if you look at an evolution, the second phase is where I would say most franchisors have been most recently, and some still are, and that's going to be trying to use the same old portals. I would say portals is a big way that people are generating franchise interest and trying to get people to come to their sites. We have found very few franchisees that have been high quality leads from portals, and so over the last 3 to 4 years, that's focused most of that budget that we just talked about, which was considerably less a few years ago. We had to shift it away from the portals, and I would say that's been more of the evolution of today's franchisor. They're trying to find high quality franchisees, and they're leaning more on a broker network. That's not been something that our brands use, but I know several brands that have had a lot of success with that. Missy was just talking about Pinot's success with that most recently. I think that's fantastic. To have a high quality broker out there representing you is great. But lifting the gates of information as a franchisor has been for us the biggest jump in how we recruit a high quality individual. Thomas was someone who helped us kind of pull back some of the blinders from what we had been doing. So for example, online, and for those of you guys who are here for our fall meeting with the Women's Franchise Network, I touched on some of this, so I apologize for laboring on this point, but it's a big point. Our website used to be highly gated. We wanted them with us so we could control the sales process and the recruiting process. And it's laughable to think that we had the opportunity to do that. The last slide that Thomas just showed you was showing how consumers, franchise buyers, and investors have been forcing us as franchisors to change the way we promote our opportunity. And so we were, I would say, we weren't late to the party, but we were not early adopters to it. But in doing so, it meant putting a lot more information out there online. It meant putting a lot more video out there online, because as Gen X and millennials, they want to consume video. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. That's their preference. And so we had to change what we were putting out there. And so I don't want to sit here and just talk around in circles, but that's the biggest thing I would say is we had to get very comfortable with having a lot of facts out there about our franchise and know that there are going to be potential candidates out there that are going to self-disqualify. And you know what? That's okay. And not only is it okay, that's a good thing, because they're not going to tie up our time. And so we made a bigger investment in putting a lot of copy out there, a lot of data out there, and a lot of video out there, and then trust the process that somebody who is that much more excited about it. And that's the person we want to talk to. And then when we're talking to them, we're not trying to hit features and benefits of our opportunity and saying, here's all the reasons why you want to be interested in Christian Brothers. Instead, we're getting a chance to focus on learning about the candidate and recruiting them, interviewing them, trying to see how well they fit our model. Does that make sense?
Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. I'm the dreaded lawyer on the panel. I have. I'm bookended by folks that know a lot more about this than I do, frankly. But I represent franchisor companies exclusively. I work for a very large law firm that represents a lot of brands and a lot of countries, in fact. I was once a franchisor, created a concept that we franchised in the late 90s, so I do have some context for this discussion. And back then it was very different, as you just described. It was limit the information you provided to candidates so that you could control the touch points and you could interact and you could get the candidate on the phone rather than interact with them through some website. It's completely different now in the way that there's a lot of emphasis by clients like you who have really bought into this idea of providing more information as opposed to less information, and that shows itself through in the FDD through item 19, where franchisors have the opportunity to disclose detailed information about their unit financial operations, the unit financial success, and that's where I see it primarily. And there is a definite trend in that direction where people are far more likely to spend time developing and crafting a well thought out item 19 as opposed to when I was a franchisor, we're really choosing not to do it at all.
Yeah, there was a point where, not too long ago, there was a point where 80% of franchisors didn't have it. It was just too much trouble, too
Right.
risky. And
Yeah, that's
we go to their attorney and say, should I do it on a 19? And the attorney whose job is to mitigate risk would say, well, no, you shouldn't.
Yeah, that's
the
exactly
best way to
right.
have no risk. Just don't do it.
Yeah, that's been turned on its head.
But today it's, I look at, in my advice, I give clients, we just always talk to your attorney, but is think of the FDD as much of a marketing tool, an opportunity to explain the business and to give people helpful, relevant information. So item 19s are certainly like Blossom, to have a recruiting website or not. I mean, a franchise purchase is a very large ticket item. It's expensive. You know, now you're a franchisee, right, at CMIT. So how long did you research CMIT before you bought? Like how long was the period of time?
Well, it was 16 years ago, so it's
Yeah.
a very different process back then.
Yeah.
But for a while, I don't remember, I said it's been 16 years, but several months.
Yeah, so I would say the typical buyer today is in the mindset of I'm open to entrepreneurship for a 2 to 4 year period and really actively looking for 6. and only engaged for the last 2 or 3. So there's this year or 2 or 3 period before where somebody's been like really looking for a fit, and people gravitate towards brands that they fit in. You know, like it's not, there's a buyer for every brand. Josh has got a great example. He's got what I would often tell people is the hardest job in franchising. It's like, look, come work with us. You have to move to a different state. We have this really distinct culture that you may or may not fit in, and if you don't, we're not going to sell it to you. And oh, by the way, you have to wait 2 years. So once you make the decision, then there's this 2-year period. It's a really difficult thing to do. So the fact that you're successful is a really good person to learn from. But the idea of having your brand story unpacked so that people who can drink your Kool-Aid and get what you do at a very deep level. We find on our sites, including Josh's on the website, sometimes before they opt in on 2 or 3 visits, an appetite for information that's 45 minutes long. And if you don't give people that level of substance, they just go somewhere else to somebody else that does give them that. And so that's one of the real barriers to discovery today. Is one of the keys to getting that number, the conversion rate higher between the people looking and the people who buy is, I mean, like, people buy things that they love. I was talking to the Young Chefs Academy gentleman here earlier. I have an 11-year-old son, and I love to cook, and if you look at my Facebook feed, it's full of big green egg pictures and smoked meat and all kind of crazy culinary stuff, and my 11-year-old loves to cook. Like, I would get that business on a very deep level. We spend a lot of time in the kitchen, and he looks for chef schools, or I've dealt with home care, I would get some of those things. You know, people gravitate towards brands that they have. They don't really start out, but I believe it's a myth in today's market that you start out the entrepreneurial search. I think I want to own a franchise, or I'm unhappy in my career and I want to do something else. Maybe a franchise is a good idea. I don't ever see buyers that come down that path. They're always, you know, I did this, I like to cook, and I have kids, and I'm really into that, and that sounds like that would be a really fun career to have. Like, that's more of the path. Or I've managed stuff, I love cars, I'm a Christian, I really appreciate the culture of this particular brand, and I can see I feel drawn to that. The most popular car of the millennial today, if you don't, I don't know if you guys have millennials in your households, I don't know if you're kind of a millennial, right? What kind of car do you drive?
I just got my mom car.
Your mom.
Santa Fe.
Yeah, so the most popular car with millennials is a white Toyota Corolla. Like, that's the number one. You guys are shaking your head. Like, it's the non-car, right? Like, it's the utilitarian, cheap, practical, fits anywhere. Like, it's the no-risk vehicle. The second most popular car with millennials is a BMW 3 Series. Like, it goes from one extreme to the other. And the reason it goes from one extreme to the other is that people buy BMWs because it makes them feel successful. It's an emotional driver behind that sale. So understanding what the emotional drivers behind your brand are is the key to creating the website like Josh did that unpacks the story and helps people relate to it at a very deep level. I mean, you get hooked at an emotional level, it's really hard to get them off the, go through hurdles to get to you. That's one way or the other.
And I can't help but say, I mean, Wayne hit on such a critical point that I had forgotten about, but in 2008, when the Federal Trade Commission had the rewrite of the disclosure, that was a tremendous, I mean, you would go into a meeting at the IFA and franchisors would be snarling, that franchisors that did not disclose an item 19 would snarl at those of us who were. I mean, they were raising their hands and you hear like, I mean, it was, that's where the industry was. And today, I mean, even at this year's IFA, I think it's less than a third are not making a disclosure of any kind.
Yeah, it's like 12%, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
it's really got
that whole thing has been flipped on its
Yeah.
head. It's crazy, yeah.
But when you talk about lead generation, pardon me just a moment, but when you talk about lead generation, so much of the lack of transparency that our industry has been known for in the past has been driven by the inability for franchisors to make a true unit level economic disclosure. And so that's gone away. And now, I mean, Wayne's our attorney too, by the way, so he's a great job representing us. But we did something crazy for us, for our brand and our culture. We put our AUV on a magazine or a magazine ad that we did for Franchise Business Review. We would have never done that back in 2005, 6, or 7. And so anyway, that because it's out there now, we want people to see that we do have something that's different also on the economic side. So, Adrian.
I was just curious, you said that most people that are looking at franchises are not saying, gee, I think I want a franchise, but I don't know what one, because it's a broker. That's what I
Yeah.
hear 99% of the time.
Yeah, my advice for brokers, and I'd talk about it, because if you think your mission is how do I generate interest for Young Chefs Academy, there's totally different strategies and tactics than how do I go to an outplacement agency and hope somebody's going to take the lead with me. One's a lot easier than the other and probably a lot more cost effective. I think you'll see that change over the next couple of years. Broker networks are starting to kind of figure out that the baby boomers are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. How many millennials do you have in your pipeline today?
Probably about 20% of them.
They're like 80% of the buying population now, right? So
Yeah.
there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
So, get my card after, I'll share some
Okay.
feedback video. Now, I think brokers have an opportunity to dramatically increase their businesses and really help brands grow, and by doing the same thing brands do, by attracting people to their own brand story, one way or the other. So, how's the rise of the millennial as a new type of buyer changing your approach? That's something everybody's trying to understand. You know, start.
I would say where our opportunities had management and leadership experience. And so there's going to be a portion of the millennial buying group right now that it's not because they're not capable of it, they just haven't had that experience yet. So the latter half of the millennials, that's still a target area for us. Someone who might be in a junior management role somewhere is primarily through video and social media to a lesser extent. We're working with our consumer marketing team to help us just be communicating more of the cultural side of what our brand is, who we are, what we're about, how we want to take care of customers. And I think that invites a millennial, because I know that's more than anything, they want to be a part of something that means something. Millennials, they want to do more than just make money. And so we're trying to relate to them. Including that in our social media streams is helpful. We'll keep inching more and more towards just full out marketing to millennials over the next decade, but that's how we're slowly working our way towards that, Thomas.
And it isn't just that marketing millennials also works for the other groups too. Just it's a different way of marketing. I mean, we do a lot of video production now because it's the YouTube generation. If you want to learn something, you go Google a video on how to fix a car or change a light bulb or fix a sink or anything you want. Even how we build our recruitment websites for millennials, and we're going to 50% video sites where it's explanatory, like what is Christian Brothers, and there's a whole video that explains what it is. Like how much can you make? And you really have to think and put the cookies on a low shelf. Like, if you're a Facebook user, and you see those really cool videos where they're cooking little like things from the top. I forget what they call those, what the brand is, but they get watched millions of times, and you almost have to unpack your brand story in that kind of piecemeal way to get it to connect. And so the older groups of buyers, the Generation X, the baby boomers, respond to long sites. Like one way to get people to slow down is just to write longer pages and add more pages and make the pages relate to the questions people ask, which is what the way we organize here. But now you have to kind of go to the next level. How can you do all of that on a smartphone? Because that's the only device people use now. Like our average mobile visitors is up around 60% on a typical recruitment website and growing.
Yeah.
It's scary, how people do. But video really is an important way. And you said something that I want to touch on is making money is important, but the why you make money is more important. That's particularly true in the millennial group. Like they have a threshold for worthiness. Like I want to do something, but I want to do something that's worthy. And as a group, they're really an interesting group because they're, you think about a baby boomer, if you are a baby boomer, you were raised to go to high school, graduate high school, go to college, get out of college, get a degree, go to work for a Fortune 500 company, retire when you're 60 or 55 if you're lucky, and retire a pension, and go play golf or live on the beach or something. Like that's the story you were fed when you were a little kid, and what most people did when they're the rest of the baby boomer kind of ethic. And millennials who went through the recession look at that and go, man, that is insane. What kind of foolish person would do that? Like that's so risky. Why would you not want to participate in the economy at your full market value? Why would you let somebody make money off of you when you could do it yourself? And so they have this really radically different way of thinking about failure. You know, failure is also, like they're fearless stuff. I mean, they're raised on .com and Silicon Valley kind of tales of awesome failure, where people like raise a bunch of money, fail, get up and do it again, and succeed on the second or third or fourth try. So they're not afraid. They don't have the risk issues that baby boomers do, which I think is a wonderful thing. If you match that lack of fear with a franchise model, which is much less risky, they actually succeed at much higher rates. And so it's been really interesting for us. We see a lot of people buying franchises right out of college now. Like that's not so much for Josh's model, but if you were a lower investment model, kind of entry level things, people are, because they're cobbling together $30,000 with family money and jumping into a business, and by the time they're 26, they've got 4 or 5 years of actual business ownership experience. They're powerhouses. It's going to transform the franchise industry. It's interesting. Anything you want to add?
I review a lot of websites to make sure that there aren't any compliance issues or franchise law violations, and it really is interesting when you get a compelling franchise opportunity website or webpage. It does draw you in, and it's something of value, and it really, I think it's certainly worth the investment. But I think the good ones make the case, right? They make the case for buying that franchise. Is it a unique concept? Is it sustainable? Is it profitable? Is it do the customers need it? And it's a good place to park your money. I mean, is it a wise place to put your money? And I think making that case is just becoming more and more critical.
Yeah. Culture is a big thing. Millennials are much more attuned to the culture of an organization than any other group. You probably see that. They want to belong to an organization. They have this sense of, as a group, of that's just being a really critical factor. And so, in your marketing, you have to speak to your culture of an organization. It's not just, if you're carpet cleaning, just that you clean carpets. It's that you clean carpets and it's fun, and we do all these cool things, and we have these special events, and we're involved in charities, and culture is very important. We treat each other with respect. Is it a fun place to work? Are people happy there? And very Yelp style, like you mentioned on your trip. I mean, people want to, and Deb talks about this a lot, that people gather information from multiple sources. In this era of self-directed research, people want the backstory. They want to get to that idea of what your culture is, both from your material, and they want to see it reflected in other places too. So just much more of an emotional play as well as a factual play on how the business works with millennials, which I think are going to be really interesting over the next. That's kind of what we were just talking about, your brand story, make or break your business. Anything you want to say on that? We kind of covered that a little bit.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, and I think fellow franchisors in here can probably echo this, but when you're talking to a candidate who isn't attracted to the story of the brand, they're not long for our process. Like we are typically looking for ways to disqualify them. And so it comes back to the story. So we want people who are attracted to the why behind what we do. And I don't know that there are many franchisors out there that don't want that at some level today. So I think the brand story it's incredibly important.
Yeah, if you go to a restaurant with a spouse or a friend, or it's a special event, you get dressed up and you're excited to be at the restaurant. And you, if this happens often to me, but you pull up the menu and there's a single thing on the menu that pops out. Has that ever happened to anybody? Somewhere in your life? So you've already committed to eat dinner at the restaurant, and you've got an emotional attachment to your time. In fact, you're sitting at the restaurant. So if you're like most people, you just would ask the waiter or waitress, what do you recommend? And this is what I get, because I ask my kids, get tired of me asking this question. I ask it every time we go out to eat. What do you recommend? And the person will say, well, it's all good. Is that helpful for you as a buyer? I'll say, well, how about the salmon? Well, I don't really like salmon. I sell a lot of it. I don't have to take much back to the chef, but I think it's pretty good salmon. You should order it. How does that make you feel? You're wondering why they take any back to the chef to start with. But if the same waiter says, the salmon's really good, it's organic, it's a really great sauce. The real star on the menu is our margarita pizza. We have a guy that comes in at 3 o'clock in the morning and makes dough from semolina flour that we import from Tuscany, and the chef grown their own tomatoes and herbs. It's a really, really good margarita pizza. That's what I would order if you were looking for a recommendation. But how does that sit with you as a buyer? And so when you're thinking about how you market your brand, particularly your brand story, the story is the essence of communication. That's how we relate to people. It's how we make sense of the world around us, and it's how we make decisions. So if you do that good of a job of articulating your brand story, people, like, they're already interested in owning the business. It's yours to lose. And you just have to, the story is what glues people to the process and propels them through to a decision. And whether they make the right decision or not, you don't have a lot of control over, but you're never going to get them in the pipeline if you don't tell a good story. So we see salespeople, it affects website design and marketing and email marketing and all the traditional, but it affects the way salespeople recruit. You know, Kendall has to be a good storyteller when she's on the phone, right? You probably tell stories a lot when you're on the phone. All day long. But she's not selling, she's a storyteller. It's a really different skill. It's more fun. It's a lot easier than selling, you know, because if you're telling stories about something you love and you're passionate about, it's people you can't really fake that. You know, people. Anything you want to add?
No, I put the nail on the head.
And so the tactics that worked in 2016, so you have anything you're trying?
Yeah, I was just mentioning to Thomas, so we are, he told you about our long lead times. So all of our locations are standalone, real estate heavy. And so it takes the areas geo-targeted. We're going in developing the site first and then marketing the opportunity from a franchising standpoint. So we're doing a couple of road shows in Cleveland is a growth market for us. So we're trying this out. The last time we did one of these was in Denver in 2011, and it was successful for us. So we're trying this a little bit differently and doing a dinner event. I'm going to have a new signed franchisee come and talk at it. He's going to be in the market as well, so he'd be someone that this new potential franchisee would be working alongside to build out the market. And then I'm also bringing an existing franchisee from the Cincinnati market. I'm going to bring he and his wife up, and they're going to talk at the evening as well, along with myself and a couple of our team members. So we're trying that. That's new lead generation tactic that's been around for a little bit. We're just trying to kind of polishing it up a bit and giving it a ride. So.
Anything you see in the
Yeah, I think that with the increased need to provide more and more disclosure around your unit finances, your unit economics have got to be good. And if they're not good, it's going to be more and more challenging to self-franchise. As we release all this information, it becomes very easy to see if the system isn't producing good margins and units are not profitable, and it becomes, without releasing that information, it becomes harder and harder to sell units. And so focusing on fundamentals and your unit economics, I think, is going to become more and more critical.
Yeah, so building a recruitment website is certainly a necessary thing today. I wouldn't try to build a franchise system without a really robust franchise recruiting website, but it's only as good as the visitors you can get to your site. So there are lots of tactics and strategies on how do you intersect people where they're looking. Like, I might love cooking and have kids, but I don't know your brand name, so I'm not going to Google it to get to your site, or I'm not a customer, so how would I know? And so intersecting people where they're looking. And if you think about, search really isn't just Google today. If you think about the audience on Facebook, which is searchable, the audience on Twitter, the audience on LinkedIn, all the different search engines, people in their email, retargeting, there's all these kind of digital strategies to get at the target person that you want and drive them to your site. And that's that takes a lot of, you still do a lot of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
They work pretty well, right? So it's, figure out who your target is and market where they are. And if you're in an industry that has trade publications, if you're CMIT doing, I think it's CompTIA is the big organization in your industry, and it's like a technology kind of marketing and where other technology people are. Makes a lot of sense. Your message resonates with those people a lot better. Google search, paid search, retargeting, which are the display ads. Every time you visit a website, you leave a cookie with an IP address. And so if you come to one of my sites, I know what kind of device you use, I know your email address, I know where you are, all kind of creepy stuff, that I probably shouldn't. And I can chase you around with display ads for 6 months, and I can make it behavior-based. There's all kind of really fascinating things you can do with retargeting in today's market, but good old email marketing works really well. People, like email marketing for us closes at a higher rate than almost anything else if you have a good message. It's amazing. Yeah, and so there's lots of those tax systems. We do a lot of advertising on Facebook and LinkedIn, depending on the brand. Something kid-oriented. We do a lot of work with Iron Sports. I don't know if you guys know those. We sell more from Facebook for them than anything else. It's kind of an amazing thing. But because Facebook's an advertising platform, just like Google. But I would say if you build a website and cover all the digital strategies, because they're the least expensive and the easiest to gain visibility, the more visible you are with your audience of people, the more effective you're going to be over the long haul. And then get into some of the strategies off the computer and to actually get real people into our trade shows and make a little bit of a comeback events, some of those things. So, anything you want to add? Okay. Lastly, this is the last one, and we'll open it for questions, but if I could mention a list of about franchise sales, it's probably long today. You'd be a great person.
I think we're kind of hitting this pretty hard already today, but I would definitely say the idea that all I need to do is just get them on the phone, and there's less of that kind of a mantra in our industry than I can remember today versus past years. But the kind of the adage that I just need to get them on the phone is one, and then I'll give any person their God-given right to fail. Those two are nauseating to me, but they're still out there. But that's, 10 years ago, when we were just starting to come into the IFA, that's all I heard.
Yeah.
That's all I would hear at roundtables. But it's nauseating to me that that's still out there. So does that make sense? The idea that anybody who wants to franchise needs to be given their opportunity to go at it. That's not the responsibility that we have as recruiters. We know what our brands need to be successful, right? Or we should. Wayne's talking about the unit level economics. We need to make sure we know what kinds of levers our franchisees need to pull to be successful in this business. And so that's what we're going after. We're going after people who know how to pull those levers and who are passionate about why we do what we do. And so it means that we have to say no sometimes. And that's hard to do when we're in a recruiting role. But when you're doing it responsibly, it's better for our brand, and it's better for that person. It's really better for that person. So that's what I would say. It's still out there a little bit, and I would say that's what's wrong.
I would say it's not easy. There's a lot of work to be done to build a pipeline of qualified candidates, and then ultimately to close them. And as Josh said, staying very disciplined to the candidate's qualifications and not allowing someone in your system that's not qualified in an effort to sustain the coffers or to generate additional cash flow, because those deals never work out, and it's always unwinding those deals is always expensive, far more expensive than it is than the money you made on the front end. So those would be that two pieces of advice.
Yeah. I think one of the big changes is that we think of in franchise recruiting, we have a sales process and we stay in process, and everybody has to go through the same steps in the same order. One of the really challenging things today is people have buying processes. People come to the table with different levels of education about the brand, different, if I've spent 2 years following Josh and I've read everything he's published, my conversation is going to be a lot different than somebody who's just went to an event and is trying to wrap their head around that event. So the more aligned you are with each individual buyer's buying process, not your sales process, the more effective you are, because the closer you can get in alignment with what that might mean that the first few calls are really different person to person. You have to tell totally different stories, and you still have to anchor them back to get the information you need, but you have to give people what they're asking for, and satisfy the appetite, or they actually can't hear you and won't go forward. And the second thing is the emotional pacing. I don't know if anybody knows what that means in sales. Emotional pacing is the typical franchise recruiting call. If you listen to a lot of calls, is you get somebody on the phone after you dial them 5 times, and the recruiter's really excited, and they do like this dump. They just dump on the person. Here's the 157 reasons Christian Brothers is amazing. You know, like you just and the poor person can't get a word in because the salesperson discusses their. Like, please don't do that. Don't be that recruiter. Ask careful questions, and when we say emotional pacing, like start people out kind of lukewarm. Don't oversell in the beginning, because people can't actually understand or relate to your whole offering in even a 1 hour conversation. So if you think of the emotional pacing, if you oversell, they peak in the very first couple of calls. The salesperson will say, "Man, I had a great call with that so-and-so. It's awesome. He's going to buy," and then he goes in the witness protection program. So if you slow down the emotional pacing, and this is true of any customer engagement, just don't oversell. Like, pace it out, carefully unpack the pieces, and try to get it better. Every time they talk to you, it gets better and better and better, and it peaks at discovery day where you're like, but they're in, they're licking the paint. Then you don't want them to lick the paint in the very beginning. So that's a real important thing to think about. People can absorb and retain the information much more effectively. I think you probably find that in your process. But those are the 2 big things. And then lastly, shorter forms and phone numbers are really important today. About a third of our leads we generate are phone call leads today, and boy, it's a real challenge to get franchise development teams to kind of coalesce around that and to be responsive, or to use call screening services to route the calls correctly. People on their cell phone, they don't want to fill a form out. They want to click a button and call and talk to a real person, and that's their moment of truth, you know. And if you're not set up for that, you're going to miss some percentage. It's amazing to me, our phone leads close at a much higher rate than web form leads. And as more and more people on their phone, we're going to shorter and shorter forms, often just with phone number, email, preferred city, and tell us about yourself. Those are the 4 things we have. And if I put anything else in the form, we get less leads and less buyers as a result. So
we just started adding text function. Yeah, they can just click a box if they would prefer a text.
that's great.
Working very well. Kendall?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say maybe 70% of our people are texting back,
Yeah.
and not necessarily just millennials.
Yeah, it's if you're not texting people, you should be texting them every time. And we've had a lot of conversations about that in the past, but there's a service out at Tennessee that was at the IFA. I don't know if that's the one you're using.
No.
Called text request.
Text request.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
They're actually
Yes.
moving.
Yeah, that one at IFA.
Yeah, but that's a really inexpensive service too. I don't think it costs very much.
Doesn't.
$20
$20 a month.
But adding that to your website will help your conversion rate. The problem is phone calls and text are not easily integratable into your CRM.
Yes.
So CRM's old school, set up for forms, and there's just some extra work to really engage people at the right level. So I think that's a brilliant thing. I love texting. I have entire conversations with people now. It's amazing like how effective it is. And
Is that a
talking over each
millennial
other.
thing? Because, is that a millennial thing? Because as me, it's gonna take me 10 times longer to do all that texting than pick up the damn phone and talk to somebody.
So here's a, it's not actually, you'd be surprised. I mean, it's all age groups. I think what makes it effective though is that phone calls, if you have a smartphone, we all screen calls. If I call you and you don't know my number, I'm not gonna answer it most likely unless, I'm in a sales role. But most likely it's gonna go to voicemail. And here's the problem with that is 78% of the people would say in surveys that they don't listen to their voicemails in a 72-hour period, if at all. So the majority of the voicemails are not ever gonna get listened to. So they were interested in talking to you, you called them, they let it roll over to voicemail, they don't know who you are and even associate your effort with them. So you have to actually make 2 or 3 calls, and you guys do that a lot, make back-to-back calls, and that was really transformative. You had a breakthrough, if I remember right. Like, they call once, leave a message, text, send an email, call again 10 or 20 minutes later, and you get people on the second call sometimes.
The text boosts that.
The text boosts that a lot too. But you have to be, the response time's gotten a lot shorter. You have to make a lot more calls and activity in a much shorter window. It used to be I'll call once today, then maybe once tomorrow, then once the next week. And if you do that, that's a recipe for failure. That just doesn't work. I mean, you gotta kind of get on people and either bug them to death so they opt out, or talk to you, that's your job, unfortunately. It makes us feel bad because we feel like we're bugging people, but you're not really. It's just, you have to work a little harder to get through the technology issues that people are using because they're inundated.
And someone sitting in an office that may be an acute farm, that doesn't want to get on a personal phone call about their future after they leave this place, seems more likely to answer a text than they would a phone
Makes
call.
sense.
And the coolest thing about it is, it doesn't matter if it takes them 10 times as long to do a phone call, they're still asking the questions that are, they're having a conversation with us.
What's a typical text, your initial text? What is it?
Initially, I like to see when they're available, so we can set up a longer call, and I get responses from that pretty quickly. I
You
get
say
off work
like, this is getting old from Christian
from
Brothers?
Christian Brothers, and I'd love to talk with you today, when's a good time? And I get it, I'll be on the spot at 2 o'clock, are you available for that? Absolutely, I'll call you then.
Yeah, because my numbers may be off, but you went from like a 40 to a 70% contact rate.
Yes.
It's a really huge bump.
Yeah, before we even integrated the text, it was about from 40%, maybe even a little bit less than that, might have been high 30s, up to about 78% or so.
Which is amazing.
So we were getting not that. So we called 100%. We were getting almost 80% of those leads.
So is your contact process followed up by email and then drip marketing and newsletters and?
Yes.
And have you tracked that as well?
No. Yes, no newsletters, but we do 3 and 3, and included in that, if they've opted into the text program, they get a text as well. So 3 phone calls, 3 emails, and then they're out.
When they're out.
And they're out.
So what do you do when they're out? Is that a recycle? You go
They
back
go-
6 months later?
They go to a bi-monthly email campaign that we have, a drip, it's just a drip
Drip.
campaign.
Okay.
Yeah, we tested, somebody at IFA said, hey, there's 15% of their deals were happening after the 3rd phone call, so we tested. I don't believe them. I don't believe them at all. So we did it for a period of, I don't know, probably 3 months or so. And we tested bumping out 4 calls, 5 calls. And gosh, and Missy, I think we were talking to you guys about it too, if y'all were doing it as well. Nobody was out there after the first 3 phone calls. So does that make sense? You guys following me with the contacts? Yeah.
I think that's it for the slides. So if there's any questions, I don't know how we do it on time, but.
We're good, we got about 5 minutes, and I did neglect to tell everybody that poor Kelly Rees was coming, but she came down with strep throat this weekend. So she texted me yesterday, it's like, oh, you keep that at home. So she's very sick, so she apologizes, but, she's not here. I feel bad she's not here, but we don't need strep, so. Very good. Do we have any other questions? No? I think we're good. Facebook Live says thank you very much, and
Guys.
thank you very much, everybody. I'm gonna shut this down. Very good.